if the credit is not trusted, we could see silver outperform anything we've ever dreamed of in our lives. And here is why.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for May 5th through May 12th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine, and we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. And finally, backdated 1/10-ounce Platinum UK Britannia are just $29 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have this returning guest. Phil Lowe is the founder of The Bitter Draught. It's a podcast channel on Rumble. You should check it out, The Bitter Draught on Rumble. And he's an Austrian-trained economist, meaning he believes in sound money and truth, and that's a rare commodity these days. Phil, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Good to see you again, Donegan.
You've been talking with us in our past visits about examples and scenarios that try to explain in common terms that everyone can understand, hopefully me, what is the likely outcome of our current trajectory of policies that are hurtling us into the abyss financially and monetarily, and what we can do about it, and explaining some common misconceptions that people may hold on to and clarifying around those. One very common and recurring question that people ask is, what is it going to look like when the wheels fall off of our existing financial and monetary edifice? When the dollar doesn't work anymore, or the banks lock up, or international trade gets so out of whack that things stop flowing and nobody can get anything, or silver or gold go to the moon in nominal terms, but we're not used to being able to carry on our lives using them. So you've got a question, or I guess a topic that is of high interest to our viewers and subscribers, specifically what healthy banking is going to look like post-crash when we return to honest money. So there's a lot of kind of built-in assumptions in that proposal, but assuming that we're heading towards a crash, and assuming that after such a crash, we can return to honest money, what would healthy banking look like?
Sure. So we have not experienced healthy banking in our lifetimes, really not since pre-33. So only the very elderly even have a vague remembrance as a small child what healthy banking actually looks like. But we are going to be returning to it. I understand there's a lot of people out there that are dooming and glooming, that we're entering the techno dystopia and the CBDCs and, all that stuff. When this actually blows, there is no choice but to return to honest money, which is gold and silver, and people are not going to want to store honest money in their houses. They're going to want to vault them. So vaults will open up, and those vaults will turn into banks. And what banking is an incredibly complex service. It's this maelstrom of activity. Dollars are going in, dollars are going out. I should say bank credit. Bank credit's going in, bank credit's going out. The money sometimes leaves itself. The money comes in, the money itself goes out. Right. So all these things are happening, and it's a real profession in its own right. But when you boil it down to its essence, historically, banks have served three main purposes. So the first and primary purpose is what I said before. It's the protection of money, which is gold and silver, in a vaulting service. It's literally you take your bag of gold and silver down to the vault, and they put it in a vault for you. And they protect it for you, and they have round the clock security. They got the big vault door that they close that it takes 3 people to open, and a secret passcode that only they know, and all that other stuff. And they have it insured, all that kind of stuff. And that's called a demand deposit. So you can come by at any time. You can present your certificate of deposit to them, and they will give you back your money. But you have to pay for this service. I've covered this before on this channel. People are used to interest rates on their checking deposits. That is only a function of the fake money that we're currently using. On a sound money system, you have to pay for this. Nobody's going to pay to look at your gold for you, right? To protect your gold for you, just so they can look at it. So you have to sit, you pay, 0.5% or 1% per annum, and they sit there, they vault the gold for you, and it sits there being safe, right? Now, when we watch old movies, what do we see? And there's a lot, Hollywood has its, hand in everything, but what we see is in every movie, there's always a bank run. In these old movies, like Mary Poppins or It's a Wonderful Life, they show these bank runs where people suspect that the money they have deposited in the bank is not actually there anymore, and they run and they go and bang on the doors and the shutters close, and it's a remnant, it's a remembrance of what happened in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. And a healthy bank, I want to stress this point. A healthy bank does not care about bank runs on its deposits. An honest banker does not care at all if everyone rushes and bangs on the door and wants to get their deposits out, because he is simply providing a vaulting service. So if I am a healthy bank manager, or if I'm a manager of a healthy bank, and the rumor gets around that there's a bank run, I don't shutter the windows and close the door. I get a megaphone and I come out and I say, I have all your bank deposits, don't worry, and we're going to stay open extra late today, and we're not going to close the doors until each one of you gets their deposit back. And then I will walk down the line, shaking everyone's hand, assuring them that they have their deposits. They can take them out if they want, and if they feel comfortable, they can come back and bring it back. And so the bank run will just fizzle out, because everyone's going to get their money, and then they're going to walk with this big bag of silver. They'll say, well, why am I holding this big bag of silver? This is dangerous. I'm going to go put it back in the bank. He didn't steal my money, right? So only dishonest banks fear bank runs. So if you watch the movie It's a Wonderful Life, when there is a bank run on George Bailey's bank, and he comes out there and he goes, I don't have your money. It's in your house, in your house, in your house. He was stealing the people's demand deposits. George Bailey was the criminal in that movie, not Potter. Potter was the hero. As usual, Hollywood gets it exactly wrong. So the second part of that is once they've deposited the money, the second thing that a bank will do is issue bank credit against the deposited money, because it's always easier to deal with credit than it is to deal with money. It's more convenient. Now, credit can be stolen. The banks can issue credit they don't have, which is the theft that we're currently engaged in. But in an honest banking system, people prefer to get a bank check, either a note or a check, versus holding the money directly. Because let's say I owe you let's say we're on a silver standard, and so $1 is 1 ounce of silver. Well, just for simplicity, and I owe you, Dunnigan, $100. That means I have to go to the bank and get $100 of coins. I mean, that's a big bag of coins. I look like one of those cartoon bank robbers when I'm walking out of there with the dollar sign on the bag. It's heavy, it's inconvenient, it's dangerous, right? And there's no tracking it, right? If there's a hole in the bottom of the bag and I didn't realize it, and half of the dollars went out, it's gone, right? But if I can use bank credit, so if I can get a bank note, I can just put that, it will say $100 on it. I can put that piece of paper in my pocket. It's light, it's convenient. No one knows I have it, which is very important, right? And it's easy to transfer to you. Even easier still in the modern world is I can just wire you $100, right? I could just type in, I could go to my bank account, says send Dunnigan $100. The bank just subtract, it virtually moves the pile of silver from my pile in my bank account to your pile in your bank account, right? Even though the physical silver didn't change hands at all. So all that all that leads to many more trades and is much more efficient, and that that service is very, very convenient compared to just trying to deal with raw money, right? And the third thing that a healthy bank does is it acts as a middleman between lenders and borrowers. So there are people who have accounts at a bank, and they say, you know what, I don't like paying this deposit fee. I would like to loan some of it out to a borrower, and then I will get interest on the bank, and I will get interest on the loan, sorry. And the bank will find a borrower, someone who wants to build a new house or start a new business, right? All these things. And they will connect the borrower to lender, and they take a little bit off the spread. And that loan is called a time deposit. And that's the difference between a time deposit and a demand deposit is that time deposit, that money is locked in for the duration of that loan. You cannot get it back. And so when there's a bank run, the bank can say, well, we can give you a demand deposit, but your time deposit is locked in here. You signed the paperwork, right? That's not your money right now. When it comes back to you, it will be your money once again. So these three fundamental functions of banking, currently modern banks, what we call banks, only provide the second service and a little bit of the third service. The first service is provided by precious metals vaults. So, when you buy an IRA, or when you put your money in an IRA, they vault your gold for you. It's the precious metals vaults. They store the gold and silver, but it's in a much more illiquid manner than it would be in a traditional bank. But it has to be, because they're not allowed to call themselves banks, right? Peter Schiff tried this, and he got hell rained upon him for trying to make a gold standard bank. So they can do, a company like Monetary Metals provides the third service. But they cannot call themselves a bank. They can't. No single institution provide all three of these services because of the current banking system is kind of elbowing the honest brokers out and forcing us to use the fiat currency, which they are. The modern banks are issuing fractionally reserved bank credit against fractionally backed notes in this never-ending Ponzi scheme. But I promise, once this blows, we must return to the fundamental principles of banking that I just talked about before. And people ask, well, how will banks, if we return to an honest banking system, won't this whole system just start again, right? Won't banks just, steal from the people, start issuing notes they don't have again in a free market, right? And the answer is no, because banks actually compete with each other on interest rates for loans and deposit fees in a free market system, right? Just kidding. So banks are trying to attract customers, and on both the borrowing and the deposit side. So a depositor is going to look and say, what are the fees? Because remember, you have to pay to deposit and a demand deposit. So they'll say, what are the fees to deposit at each of these banks? And if they're all flat, then it doesn't really matter. But if one bank has substantially lower fees than the other banks, what happens? All the depositors run over there. Now, how is that bank? All the other bankers are going to sit there and say, how is that one bank able to provide much lower fees than we have? And they go, They do all the calculations and they think, you know what? We think that bank is engaging in fractional reserve banking. Because if you don't actually have the money that you say you have, Dunnigan, it's a lot easier to provide lower interest rates, it turns out, right? So what the honest banks will do is what Potter does in It's a Wonderful Life. He announces to the whole town, he says, George Bailey doesn't have the money in his vault that he says he has. And so the people start panicking and banging on the door. And then Potter comes out and he says, I will give you 50 cents on the dollar for your ticket, for your demand deposits at Bailey's bank. So some of the people take that, right? They take the 50 cents on the dollar because they think, well, if I don't do that, I'm going to lose everything. And then Potter shows up with the pile of receipts and says, I want the gold. You owe me the gold that's backing these receipts, right? And once again, an honest bank doesn't care. They say, here's the gold, right? And the bank run would fail. That bank attack would fail. But a dishonest bank would fail that test. So they shutter the windows, close the doors, and the bank manager skips down on the next train, right? So that's the competition between banks is what keeps the system healthy in a free market. Now, what happened in the 1890s through the 1910s was they centralized the banking system, right? And into the 1920s and 30s, they centralized the banking system, and we had the Federal Reserve Bank that prevents these banks from attacking each other. No one's allowed to attack each other anymore. And so the point, I think Rafi said this once, and it's a brilliant observation, there's really only one bank, right? Because these banks are all so interconnected now that if any one bank fails, they all start to tumble right away. And the Federal Reserve have to come in and, quickly patch up the system before it blows up again. So we will see, on the other side, we absolutely will see healthy banking. I'm not worried about that at all. It would just be by necessity. We're going to go back to what the roots of free market banking were.
Let me just challenge you, because I followed your whole argument and I love the It's a Wonderful Life movie. But the assumption or the conclusion that you have led to is that because of its inherent flaws and weaknesses and complexity and something, and mathematical self-destruction built into it of the time bomb of the existing Keynesian fiat-based exponentially growing currency system. And you didn't really, this isn't the path that you led us to today, but I think that's behind some of what you're saying. That's going to blow up. It's going to fail. And it can only be replaced by something that's real and honest and true. Is that the only conclusion? Or is it possible that the forces of evil will just double down and do something that gives them more control, more autocracy in our lives, and we have less freedom, less privacy, and because there's already an element of sort of force, just like the taxation system. You say, I don't think it's fair, I don't think it's just, I don't think it's constitutional, I'm not going to pay my taxes, and you might find yourself in prison. You go, well, okay, I'll pay my taxes. But isn't forcing people who are already slaves to the system into yet further down the rabbit hole of CBDCs and so on a likely major push by a system that's based on lies, deception, threats, intimidation, misleading people, rather than a return to honest money initially? Or is that a chapter for another day? That's that whole conclusion of how we lead back to a happy ending of this story.
No, I can answer that.
Go ahead.
Sure. So when Bernie Madoff's scheme blew up, right? If he had said, okay, listen, I know that old thing blew up, but listen, I have this brand new product, this brand new investment product. If you all jump in now, you can get on the ground floor. Would anyone have taken that? Anyone on earth?
So,
no, right. So the market,
because I mean, this is a very fruitful discussion. So I'd like to have it just at least briefly with you. I'm just freewheeling here. There's so much that's not understood by so many people in our world today about the misleading and mysterious mechanisms of our existing financial and monetary system. But there's a lot of good faith and goodwill and misplaced trust by people in mainstream media, mainstream medicine, mainstream government, mainstream big agri, big pharma, keep going on down the list, that if the fact as a broker, when I try to help people understand why they have to pay $25 for $1 worth of 1964 silver dimes or quarters or whatever, and they say, why is it so expensive? Why am I having to pay so much for it? And it's just such an uphill swim against nominal confusion and human nature of placing misplaced trust in fake money and fake banking and fake news and that sort of thing. It just seems to me you're going to end up with a very growing but minority who really get it, who really understand what you're describing. Maybe that's why a lot of our viewers are late career stage or retirement age. If you look at the demographics of Liberty and Finance's subscriber base, it's heavily skewed into the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. People who've had enough life experience to either remember when money was real or have learned enough times that they were lied to by the Bernie Madoffs of the mainstream media and elected officials, etc. So I don't know. It's less obvious to me how we end up only on a sound system, unless you say that it's because there's enough disruption of people's lives, widespread enough to wake up enough people that you get a critical mass forms of those who are unwilling to go along with. It's just dismaying to me to see how many people still will reference mainstream media as fact checkers or take experimental treatments as scientific or safe and effective or things like that, that even after all we've been through in the past 4 years, on top of everything else that came before.
My call is this is going to be a magnificently large crash. I mean, something that's just going to melt your face off. So, these kind of things tend to be very cathartic and is it catharsis or is it catalytic? I'm trying to maybe think of what's the thing you're catalyst.
The thing that brings you together to make something new happen is a catalyst.
Yes.
But
That's our,
cathartic is
we're,
it washes you out, it purges you of what was holding you back. So maybe those are both true.
Yeah, I'm calling for a catalytic change. Like the world we're going to be on the other side is going to look very, very different than the world we're currently in. And I don't think CBDCs and the techno dystopia is something we have to worry about, because the market gets a vote too. And you can deceive, like, what's that? You can deceive some of the people some of the time. You can deceive
All of the people some of the time, and some of the people.
You can't fool everybody all the time. It's been almost a century of people getting fooled, but it cannot last forever. I absolutely promise that. It cannot last forever. And this actually brings into the second one, which is silver's role as a monetary safeguard against excess gold certificates being printed. So silver, which you were going to ask me that, but I'll ask myself that question. So silver is the people's money, right? It doesn't, the banks don't write credit notes off of silver. They write credit notes off of gold. Now, silver has always been the direct money, and it can be used to, because there were silver dollars and there were silver certificates. Never mind. Banks did issue some certificates off of silver, but the Federal Reserve note is a note off of gold, right? So you could, when you demand a dollar, you could demand a silver dollar, or you could demand a Federal Reserve note, right? The free market never demonetized silver. The people didn't wake up one day and, you know what? We don't like silver anymore. We just want to use gold in and of itself, right? In 1873, the government started suppressing silver. They basically took silver and pushed its head underwater until the bubbles stopped coming up. But the suppression, it was suppressed it can be suppressed as a money. It cannot be demonetized. That's what I'm trying to say. So you can tell everybody, just like every other Ponzi scheme, don't ignore that stuff that has intrinsic value that people have valued for thousands of years. But take what wealth you were going to store in my new product, which are these fancy new certificates that are theoretically backed by gold, right? It can be suppressed as a money, and it's been suppressed as a money since 1873 in favor of gold. And anyone who gets caught on the wrong side of a suppression of silver gets massively hurt by it. In 1970, this is slightly before my time, but in 1979, 1980, right, the silver price went up to $50. And if anyone jumped, all the libertarians, I'm sure, said, "Oh, we're going back to a silver standard. It's the gold. It's the new golden age of our lives." And then, of course, Volcker comes in, and anybody, who's buying, YOLOing into silver at $50, they still have not gotten their dollars back after, 40, 50 years later. So, but as bad as that was, it cannot be suppressed forever, and it can never be truly demonetized, because when you know what money is the most liquid commodity in a market. That's definitionally what it is. And silver, not gold, is actually the most liquid commodity in a market. So it's an intrinsic property of the metal itself within the constructs of our market. Now, that doesn't mean a scientist can look at the silver and look it under a microscope and say, "Oh, there's the liquidity right there. I can see it," right? Liquidity is a function of the market itself. But within the function, the construct of a free market, silver is the most liquid direct money. So even in its suppressed state, so even with the central banks, the bullion banks, they have all these notes for silver for the silver that doesn't exist, and the silver's futures contracts and the games they play with silver, and like I said, they're sticking silver's head underwater until the bubbles stop coming out. Even in its suppressed form, you can still store your wealth in silver now, because the price can't get any lower. They're doing all they can, and silver is like slowly raising its head up, trying to get a gasp of air, and eventually it's going to, do a Hulk and throw off its shackles. But even right now in its suppressed state, you can still store your wealth in the form of silver. You can collect silver and store it into your vaults, right? So the very act of converting your dollars into silver, when people call you or Miles Franklin directly and they say, "We want to convert our dollars into silver," what they are saying is, "I do not believe," they're telling the banking sector, "I do not believe the gold certificates you have issued are accurately backed up by redeemable gold," right? So the same can be done with gold. I mean, you can call Miles Franklin to get gold, but the problem with gold is that it's so high powered, right, that it's not easy to do in small increments. So what's 1 ounce of gold right now? It's $3,300. So I could, take $3,300 and go get an ounce of gold. But what does that leave me? That leaves me with one coin, so I can make one single transaction worth $3,300, or I can start shaving it off. But then the currency, the difference between money and currency is a standardized weight of money. So if I start shaving the coin off, even though the gold is still money, however, now it has to be weighed, it has to be tested every time. And people might say, I don't trust that half coin of gold. I don't know, right? So you can keep, with silver, you can keep it into small coins much more easily than you can with gold. And that actually brings me into the third question, which I will leave it to you, or leave you to ask me.
Well, this is fascinating because some of these questions just don't get asked often enough, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. So the third question is, what are your best estimations of silver's monetary future, which is what you've been describing it has in the past, but where you think the gold-silver ratio will settle after a lot of volatility? We're certainly seeing some of that volatility now.
Sure. So there's a lot of active discussion in this space about what is silver's future, what this is all going to look like. And I'm absolutely calling for at least temporarily fully monetized silver again. So that's the 15-to-1 silver to gold ratio. And I've talked about this before on your show. That's the period of time when you can buy the mansion in Brooklyn for 100 ounces of silver. People are desperate to get even a little bit of silver, and you buy all the assets in sight. That's not quite what I'm talking about here, or what I'm going to cover here, because I've already covered that, right? I'm going to cover what we're going to see after this, right? After the crash, when life starts to return back to a normalized life on an honest money system, whether that be just a gold standard or some sort of bimetallism with gold and silver. So I personally would love to see a return to a silver standard, like, a pre-1873 silver standard. I don't think this will happen for long. And I get this question a lot from people who say, Phil, why do you think it's not going to stay at 15-to-1? Why should I? People email me, I want to get into silver, but I'm worried, how do I know it's going to spike to 15-to-1? How do you know it's not going to stay at 15-to-1? Where are you getting these ideas from? And the answer is credit. The answer to this question is credit. Why silver's not going to stay at 15-to-1? There are two ways to buy things done. Again, there is money and there is credit for money, right? Those are the only two ways, like I said before. And the most basic form of credit is the note, right? The physical paper note. But there's additional credit beyond that, right? There's the wire transfer, or the bank account transfer, like I talked to you before, where I can just send you some money. There's Venmo, there's PayPal, right? And each of these is more convenient and more secure than the method before it. So the bag of money it's the most honest, but it's the least secure and the least convenient, right? Because I have to cart physical money over to you. With a physical note, I can put it in my pocket. But again, I could be, a guy could think I have this note in my pocket, so he could come and try and rob me at gunpoint, and then I have to hand the note over to him. If it's a bank transfer, I can do it like this, right? Or I could, pull out a credit card, and then if he steals my credit card, I can call the credit card company and cancel the cards, right? And now the next one is the biometric scanning. You go to the grocery store, and now you can wave your hand at the thing, and that is impossible to steal from. I mean, it has its down. I don't recommend this. I think this is very dystopian, but it is impossible for a thief to steal from you. He would have to kill you and cut off your hand, and then hold a severed hand up to the cashier, right? So, and that's not going to work anymore. So this, each round of credit is getting more and more secure. I'm not saying it's perfect. Absolutely has its downsides, and I'm against the biometric scanning, for the record, for all the viewers, right? But as long as the credit is trusted at each step of these, as long as the credit is trusted, it doesn't actually have to be there, which is because they're stealing from us right now. But as long as the people trust it, as long as the people think the credit is trustworthy, credit will beat money hands down every time as a medium of exchange. It's so much more convenient. If you look back to what people had to do to pay the bills in like the 1920s or 1930s, so that, there's a movie, Cinderella Man, and it's about a boxer in the Great Depression. And there's a scene, it's this throwaway scene. I don't know why it sticks in my head, maybe because it's monetary. But the power man, the electric man, comes, he's, banging on the door. He's, you owe me 35 cents for this month's electricity. And of course, it's the Depression, and the mother doesn't have it. So he goes and, flips the switch and turns off the electricity. So they actually had because they were dealing with silver and actual money notes, they had to have a man come by in an armored car to physically take the money out of your hand. And that was a job, right? That was somebody's job, was to go collect the silver and put it in the car and then drive it off to to pay for the electricity, right? Now it's so much more convenient. It's auto pay, right? I don't even know what my electric bill is most of the time. I get an email once a quarter that I check, or once a month that I check. But because credit has made life so convenient, people are going to want credit again. And I don't know. The credit chains right now are impossibly long. I mean, they're infinitely long because they're trying to convince us that credit is in fact money. We're definitely going to see much, much, much smaller credit chains before money actually has to change hands again. We're not going to see what we're seeing right now. I don't know where it's going to land on again. If the gold credit is trusted quick, so if the crash happens and the gold credit, all the gold's in Fort Knox. Donald Trump melts it down into little coins and distributes them on the banking sector. And the free market banks start issuing bank credit again. And people say, oh, thank God we have these notes again. We trust it. Everything's fine. Everything's fully redeemable. We could see a quick return to a pure gold standard, in which case silver is not necessary as a money because you can just use gold credits. However, silver will always, Dunnigan, be the backstop to distrusted gold credits. It will always be there for you. And all that said, I want to add one other thing here. If the credit is not trusted, we could see silver outperform anything we've ever dreamed of in our lives. And here is why. So silver comes out of the ground in an 8 to 1 ratio, not 18 to 1, 8 to 1 ratio with gold, right? And the most of the above ground silver supply has already been consumed by industrial uses. So the actual above ground silver supply right now is lower than the gold supply. There's less available silver than gold. And additionally, the world's population is dramatically larger than it was in 1963, or really any point you want to look at in the past where we were using silver even vaguely, like we were in 1963, the world's population is dramatically larger than it was. And there are more goods and services competing for money than there ever were in 1963 as well. So if you fundamentally think about what money is, it's the medium of exchange between goods and services among people, right? So if there's more people, and there's more goods and services, and there's less money, then one would think that, logically, it would infer that the purchasing power of that money will be drastically higher. Now, I'm agnostic on this point. I've been chatting with other people in this space who are making this point, and I want to present it to the audience. I think it could happen. I'm not specifically calling for it, but what we could see is even with just a 15 to 1 ratio, we could see that silver, the purchasing power of silver, dwarfs anything we thought it would in the past. So in the 1920s, 50 cents bought you a steak dinner with wine and a tip for the waiter in Manhattan, right? And those were two 90% silver quarters. What we could see, because there's so much less silver available, they're going to have to alloy it with copper. So we're probably going to see, in this scenario, what we're going to see is, the new quarters are going to maybe be 10% silver, 90% copper, but they'll have the 10% silver in there. And that silver will be so unbelievably valuable that the price of the price of a steak dinner in Manhattan with wine and a tip for the waiter will be 50 cents. But the coins will only be 10% silver instead of 90% silver. So that purchasing power will have dramatically increased in terms of what silver can buy. And once again, this entire premise that I'm making entirely depends on gold's ability and the bank's ability to issue trustworthy credit. If we return to trustworthy credit very, very quickly, we probably won't see this. We will absolutely see the 15 to 1 temporary crash where you go buy the personal aircraft for a couple of rounds of silver. We will see that. What I'm talking about is an extended period of extreme silver purchasing power. That I am agnostic on. However, I am presenting it to you and the audience here. I would say temper your expectations on this particular claim, but if it happens, jump in, enjoy the ride.
many of our clients and viewers and subscribers have been expecting that we'll see a reconciliation of true sound money's value to its historical mean, at least. It's interesting that that seems to be a fundamental and sort of nature-driven underlying principled expectation that has legs. There's this other principle that is those that are in power are loath to give it up. And the one other thing you didn't mention, I didn't hear it, about the convenience of credit is that it can be manipulated and controlled by authorities to say, well, you only get access to your credit if you say the right things, do the right things, associate with the right people, go the right places, and comply with our behavioral controls, whatever, your carbon credits, etc. So that's something that they lose control over when people are free to live their lives as they see fit using sound money. That's going to be a Herculean battle, and it's one that we're engaged in right now. So it's going to be important for us to stay on the right side of that morally and from a practical preparedness standpoint. Phil, we're grateful for your accompanying us along that journey and thinking through these thought exercises are very fruitful, I believe, because they really get us to grapple with these assumptions and lies that we've been told and things that we half believe and behaviors that we don't even know. Why am I even doing this? Why am I going along with this? And that sort of thing. So also the nominal destruction of purchasing power of our credit, I'll call that, our currency, is also a free ticket to steal from us in terms of fake capital gains tax. That's another thing that clients encounter when they're selling back precious metals to a dealer, and they're getting a much higher nominal output in Federal Reserve notes than they put into it, and then the IRS says, well, that might need to be reported on a 1099-B because you looks like you had a nominal capital gain. And they go, it's the same ounce of gold, it's the same ounce of silver, it's the same pre-1965 silver dime that I sold back. It hasn't changed at all. It was you who destroyed the currency along the way. So that's another aspect of credit that the power structure will be loath to give up, is the ability to I would say, immorally tax people on a fictitious gain that is only in nominal terms. It's not necessarily in real terms. So it's a hurt.
Money in that situation. In that situation, money will rise to the occasion. Money itself, because they can't. If you're trading direct silver for direct goods and services, there's no way to overwatch that unless they have a drone in the sky.
Well, this is exactly my point. This is my point. This is what I'm saying is, as much as we say that makes sense from a freedom standpoint, yeah, but it doesn't make sense from a autocratic overlord standpoint, and that's the battle that we find ourselves in addition to all the other ones that you identified. Fascinating times, and we've got to stay on the right side of this. So thank you, Phil. If people want to follow your writing, because you produce lots of educational videos on your channel, where should people find you?
Sure. You can find me on the Bitter Draught at rumble.com. And I am actually now responding. I got a message from people on YouTube saying we can't get Rumble in our country. So we're very grateful for you producing YouTube. And then I realized it wasn't just people too lazy to go click on rumble.com. There were people who were unable to click on rumble.com. So I am now active on YouTube as well, also at the Bitter Draught. And you can find me on X at the Bitter Draught, and you can email me at thebitterdraught@gmail.com.
All of those bitter drafts are spelled with the historic spelling DRAUGHT. So that people might type it in phonetically and go, hey, I'm not finding it, but that's where you'll...
Link will be in the description.
The link will be in the description of this video. Thank you very much, Phil Lowe, for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance.
Take care, Donegan.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for May 5th through May 12th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine. And we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. And finally, Backdated 1/10 ounce Platinum UK Britannia are just $29 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.